Hi, everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New
Oh,
Year.
oh,
um, it's me, Susan Storm, founder of Psychology Junkie, and I am so excited you're here because this is one of the most fun streams I think at least for me, I will have done thus far because we're going to be talking about what we love about each of the introverted Myers-Briggs personality types. And Denzel, who's also joining me, is my friend and fellow typology expert and personality coach. Denzel, can you introduce yourself to people who are online?
hey everyone. My name is Denzel Mensa. I'm an ENFJ, 9-1, social sexual. I'm a life, personal development, and relationship coach. My services can be found at denzelmensa.com. I also have a YouTube channel. And yeah, I'm not only a coworker with Susan right now, but genuinely really good friends with her, like really good friends. So happy.
Yay! Yeah, me and Denzel have lots of good memories together. We've done some trips together, him, his wife Jamila, me, and my husband. So it's a lot of fun whenever we get a chance to do anything together. So yeah, as I said earlier, we're gonna be raving and gushing about the introverted Myers-Briggs personality types. So if you're an introvert, I hope you're here to watch this, and we will definitely get to your type. I have so many good things to say. I have this giant list of notes that I took today just to try to keep track. I'm not a good, I have to have notes. It's just like a thing. And so I'm very, very excited. And we thought we'd start with the INFJs and then move on to the INFPs and then INTJs, INTPs. But we're going to get to everyone. So let's get started. Let's go ahead and start with INFJs. I'm going to mention one thing that I really love about them. And, maybe several things. One of the things that I personally really love about INFJs is that you can talk about almost anything with them. And as an INTJ, this is great for me because I often find that when I'm talking to people, there's only so deep they're willing to go, especially into anything very abstract. But as fellow introverted intuitive types, I can get really deep with INFJs and they enjoy it. It's like, oh, I'm finally talking to someone who actually likes talking about the things I like talking about. So we can talk about religion. There's nothing that's, not allowed. You can talk about spirituality, religion, politics. You can talk about, the anime you've been geeking out about and what you think of the characters. I mean, and you can take anything and it can go deeper than you ever thought it could go. Whereas with some people, it's like, oh, I like this, and that's the end, and you move on to a different subject. With INFJs, you can get really deep and find multiple layers of meaning in something rather than just staying on the surface. Denzel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, INFJs are literally amongst my top three favorite personality types. And of all the 16, I feel the most similar to them. So we have like a natural soulship, if you will. Like, as soon as I meet another INFJ, then we both often feel like long lost siblings. My very, very close friend, David, I've interviewed him a few times on my own channel. He's an INFJ. We've been best friends ever since we were like 2 years old. He was the best man at my wedding. And we're very, very alike in many ways. And I think that when it comes to all the INFJs I've met, the through line definitely has been that you're able to talk to them about nearly anything. I love how you're able to shift perspectives with all of them. Everyone most likely knows Joyce Mang, and she's another great example. I can actually literally bring up any topic to Joyce, and Joyce is so non-judgmental, and then also on top of that, she can see the different perspectives, and she might not talk as fast and as fluently, but she's it's always worth waiting for when she does speak, because you can tell that there's going to be like something like very insightful there. And yeah, I really just enjoy spending time with her, enjoy talking to her. I love the insight that INFJs are able to provide about humanity, and society in general, like especially as an ENFJ. Whenever I'm thinking of certain grandiose like topics and everything, and I bring it to an INFJ, then it's almost like we sharpen things together. So a lot of the concepts, such as like I talk a lot about platonic intimacy, and a lot of things having to do with like interpersonal nuance. And when I bring it to INFJs out of, again, like all the 16, the people that I've like met, the 16 types, the INFJs have been the ones that like have most easily grasped the idea of like, platonic intimacy and stuff like that, aside from ENFJs, of course. And it just becomes like very intuitive to them, and we're able to actually explore like different nuances of the interpersonal nuance in that way, and really like sharpen it. And there's this like way of like, I go out to almost like gather the information, like I guess in the FESE way, and then I'll have like the theories about it, and then they help me sharpen the theories, and then we have more theories, and then it's like, all right, go back out and test this information in real time, like with people. And then I come back, I bring the information, I'm like, so this is what I came up with myself. And then it's like, from whatever I've gathered, then they're able to now kind of like finish the job. So we kind of do this like helping each other out to arrive at certain conclusions. And I really appreciate that about them. I really appreciate how far out that they're able to think, how warm they are toward other people. But even while still being warm, they're also very analytical, very logical. And those who are able to like have that balance of the FE and the TI, it's absolutely amazing. So yeah, I'm a big fan of INFJs.
Thanks, Denzel. Yeah, if you're just tuning in, because I know a lot of people kind of jumped in as you were talking. Yeah, we're talking about INFJs, and I agree with everything you said, Denzel. INFJs can go really deep into different subjects, but they also, because they have introverted thinking, it's like they can, for me as a thinking type, they can also get into the nuts and bolts of what they believe in and what their values are and everything. Like, they're not afraid of a healthy, conscientious debate either. Like, they enjoy understanding the logic of things as much, almost, it feels like almost as much as they enjoy understanding people themselves and emotions that are involved in situations. But they have this deep understanding, but they also are very warm and friendly. And so they put you at ease with that warmth that they just exude into the world. And I think that's a really special thing. Sometimes for me as an INTJ, it's like, whoa, it's like the extroverted feeling of feeling judgers kind of like makes me feel a little unstable, but I know it's a good thing. It's just that it's like, wow, do they really feel this way about me? Or like, I don't understand. Why are they being so nice to me? But I actually have grown to really appreciate it. And I think that warmth that they bring, the empathy they bring, and the depth that they bring to any relationship is extremely valuable. You'll learn things about yourself being around INFJs. So now let's move on to INFPs. So INFPs, and also, by the way, I did also want to give a shout out to Joyce Meng, the amazing INFJ, because I have her on my notes. I was like, Joyce, because I think she's a great example of a wonderful, insightful INFJ. And if you don't know who Joyce Meng is, you can definitely check out her YouTube channel. It's called Type Talks. So she's an INFJ who does lots of interviews with people about type, and she shares lots of great insights. So definitely check her channel out. INFPs, probably in my top 3. I know we probably shouldn't have favorite types, but they're probably in my top 3 favorite types. One of the things I really love about INFPs is they create a safe space for you to be 100% authentic. And to the point where they're gonna get impatient if you're trying to placate situations or trying to be I don't know, you're trying too hard to be socially appropriate, that you're not getting to the real stuff. And I love that about INFPs. They are willing to be vulnerable to get their point across, to stand up for their values, to stand up for what they believe in. And there's just this insight that they bring and this willingness to go to places that lots of other types shy away from, that I really appreciate. Emotional places that other people shy away from. I've never gotten the kind of empathy from any other type that I think I've gotten from INFPs personally. And I think that's because they're not just, they like really, I'm tripping over my words, but they really want to understand your real feelings, good and bad. And they're not afraid to go to that dark place and to get really far into it. And they're also very willing to see you and accept you for your flaws as well as for what makes you great. But I think that it's just that openness to understand that there's these dark parts of life and there's these light parts of life, and nobody is perfect and everyone's got these mixed up things going on inside, and the willingness to really go there that a lot of other types don't have, that I really appreciate with INFPs. I also really like their imagination, their ability to just come up with these incredible creative ideas at the drop of the hat. I've never known an INFP who wasn't wildly creative. I've known so many INFP musicians, and I've known INFP writers, and they all have something that they bring a lot of depth and imagination into. And my favorite pastor growing up, I grew up going to this church, and he was an INFP, and I don't have the same religious beliefs I had growing up, but I still would listen to anything this pastor had to say because I've never met a pastor like him. He was willing to be very vulnerable and very almost uncomfortably honest to connect with people and to get a point across. And that's something that I really admired. What about you, Denzel?
Yeah, I really love INFPs as well. I have quite a few in my life that just are such great examples. I feel like one of the earliest examples, aside from my younger sister, I could say a lot about her, but one of the earliest examples I can remember is an INFP friend of mine from high school. Her name is Albany. She's actually been on my channel as well. I did an INFP versus INFJ video with her and David, coincidentally. And Albany was someone who, even though I had very strong Christian values and she did not have these strong Christian values, she not only respected my Christian values, but she respected them enough that whenever I was struggling with staying with them and like having like moments of weakness or whatever, then she would remind me of like what my values are and who I am in a very kind and gentle way. But Albany was also really great at being somebody that I could talk to about, you know, whatever. Like she brought up so many different things of like that I would have never thought about, like on my own, like especially back then, like I had a way of thinking that I was like, yeah, I think this is the right way, boom, boom. And then she was like, you know, she would say things like, yeah, I kind of feel like XYZ or this is that, like something super, super, super unconventional or just not really something that I'm like, used to. And I'm just like, huh? And my mind, I guess like being like FE, I'm like, and then I'm like, that I mean, that's not really like the social norm. That's not really like conventional. That and especially as a Christian at times, like that's not really like Christian. But I mean, if I look at it from this perspective, that actually would be kind of cool, you know, not even just past theory, but like, you know, as an actual thing. And then it's funny because we talked recently, like we go months without talking, but then when we do talk, it's just amazing. She's definitely a soulmate of mine. As in like somebody that I have a very close soul friendship with. And we both talked about like how we would not be who we are today if it wasn't for the seeds that we planted in each other to like kind of expand each other. So I think that her being like my shadow type as an ENFJ, that was really helpful. And I've seen that with a lot of other INFPs, like again, not only my younger sister, but also even Jamila's older sister. We have a lot of great conversations, and it's just this interesting way of like we're coming at everything from completely like different angles, but we're covering the same territory, like FEFI, NENI, you know, SESI, TETI, and whatever we're discussing, as long as we have the openness to like, if we want to disagree, then we can respectfully disagree, but it's all about expansion of the mind. It's all about expansion of values even, and testing those values and seeing how things can like come about. I really love their imagination. I really love the creativity that they have. Like I think of artists such as like Kendrick Lamar, and the way that he's able to story tell through his music is incredible, you know. And I just think of a whole bunch of like other examples of INFPs like in general, and it's Lauren Hill. You know, there's just so many like different examples of them, and their minds are like, you can never say that an INFP's mind is not rich. And sometimes I feel bad for them because they're pushed to kind of like suppress that imagination of theirs. And I really try to encourage them, especially when I'm coaching them, to let the imagination just like run wild. allow that extrovert intuition to like come out as strongly as it does, and still continue to be that anchor for other people who need to be reminded of who they are. So yeah, I'm a big fan of INFPs.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned introverted sensing, and that's another thing that I do enjoy about INFPs is that they have this really nostalgic quality, and they have these other people, certain people have likes and dislikes. I feel like INFPs have like comfort obsessions. I don't know the right word. There's probably a better word, but it's like if there was a book they loved when they were 12 years old, like they keep reading it over and over again, and they might have all the like memorabilia from that book, and they really have these little like special memories and special likes and dislikes that just last their entire lives. And I think it's so interesting to see what those things are and to listen to them have the chance to geek out about it. But what I also love is that they'll do that for you too. Like if you went up to an INFP or an ISFP and you're like, I just really love this, I don't know, this movie, and I'm so invested in the characters. And it was kind of like this thing that you might feel uncomfortable telling other people about because you're like, I know it's not real. Why do I care about these characters? An INFP or an ISFP is someone you can talk to about it because they will just geek out with you about things like that. And I think that's something that I really appreciate about them is they accept people's quirks and they're kind of the odd sides of people, and they're curious about that. And then they'll say things that kind of draw that out. And so they learn about people's idiosyncrasies and give people a chance to show their idiosyncrasies, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. That's perfectly said.
All right, so now we're going to INTJs. It feels weird a little bit to go on and on about my type and how great it is, but I'm going to do it anyway. One of the things I love about INTJs is they're always focused on growth. They are not stagnant people who are just like, I'm just going to let my life go by and meet the status quo. Like they're always trying to grow, whether it's mentally by learning lots of new things or whether they're really ambitious sometimes in their career efforts, but they're very, very focused on growth and getting away from mediocrity. And that's something that I think is really fun to be around, that desire to grow as a person and that desire to become more knowledgeable, that desire to go after your vision or your goals. That's something that I always appreciate that in people who have the determination to do that. That's something that I really appreciate about INTJs. I also think INTJs are a lot kinder than most people think or know about. I have met so many really kind and compassionate INTJs, but they're kind and compassionate, but they're also just very straightforward when they're speaking to you. Like you don't have to wonder how they feel about you or how they feel about something. They'll tell you, and I appreciate that honesty. I appreciate how straightforward they can be, but I also appreciate that, like INFJs, they can go into really deep, abstract places. You could spend forever talking about inception with an INTJ and what it means, and then dissecting the symbolic meaning of dreams, and then kind of thinking about what that means for the future. And this is something that you can really get into these really deep, interesting, abstract topics with INTJs. And you can walk away and feel like you've learned so many things. And I thought of Lauren, your friend Lauren, who we met at the Personality Hacker. Well, I met at the Personality Hacker. Yeah. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time with her, but when we talked, I felt like, oh, this is like someone I click with immediately. Very kind INTJ, very wise, knowledgeable INTJ. I also find that INTJs have an adventurous side. I don't know about Lauren specifically, but most INTJs I've known, even though they're very often very bookish, there is a side of them that likes to go out and try new things and challenge themselves. I think with all INTJs particularly, there's a desire to challenge themselves. And I think that goes along with what I was saying about growth. And that's something that I really appreciate in people and look up to, is when people are willing to challenge themselves and to do things that are hard and push themselves in order to be who they want to be. And that's something that I often find with INTJs and really, really appreciate. What about you, Denzel?
Yeah, so I know that you said for the last one that, oh, we shouldn't play favorites, which is funny because as I was driving home right before this stream, I was like running simulations of how the stream was gonna go, and it's like, oh, should I be like subjective or should I like be? And I was like, yeah, no, I'm gonna be subjective. Like as long as I have good things to say about every type, then that's what matters, right? So I have no shame in saying that INTJ is my number one favorite type. And they're just a type that like I've not only found the most I guess fascination with, but like really like a strong kinship with. And I have a lot of examples in my life that I've just created incredible bonds with over time. And the things that like I appreciate probably most with them is they have a very strong tenacity, but at the same time they're very gentle too. And I think it's that TEFI in the middle, that polarity. Like they have that like logical mind, that very like rational mind and everything. And personally, I think especially the INTJ women, because they actually like a lot of times are a lot more in tune with their FI than say like INTJ men who are more socialized to being like just TE. But I have met a lot of INTJ men who are also like tapped into that FI, and they're some of the most enriching people, to like talk to. I had an INTJ friend over just yesterday, and we had amazing conversation about the difference between the unconscious and the subconscious, which I had never even delineated the distinction between those two myself. And we were talking about like the different realms, and like we were exchanging information on so many different things. We went on a shamanic journey together. It was just so much, and it was our first time meeting in person. He was actually a client that I had just about 2-3 weeks ago, and we both found out that we live in Atlanta. It's like, yo, well, after the session, I was like, okay, well, you're cool, so I'm gonna let you know, like, I live in Atlanta too, like, we should hang out. And boom, and yeah, it's already blossoming into like a great friendship. I think of like even like fictional characters such as, I personally believe that L from Death Note was an INTJ, even though he externally has all of the INTP quirks. So it's like very easy to type him as an INTP, but I think that he was an INTJ. Light Yagami was an ENTJ. And L was literally one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. The foresight that INTJs are able to have, but yet you can still see the soft core that they have. Some of them may not admit it, others will. But when you're able to actually see that soft core and you see that past everything, they really do want to love and to be loved, but they also want to make sure that they do things efficiently. I just find so much beauty in that. There's an insane amount of depth that INTJs have, and they won't just unveil that to everyone. I've seen that it takes time to really like dig into that, and if you don't have the patience for it, well, then they have absolutely no problem with just not giving that to you. You like, if they're not the types that you can just rush to get to know, but as you like gradually like peel onion layer after onion layer after onion layer, then you start to see like, wow, like just how much rich color lays beyond like everything that they are, and they're not just maybe like from the external like some stoic face. I'm thinking again of like Shoto Todoroki from My Hero Academia. Like, he has such a rich background, and the core FI is like there, but then at the same time, you see like how tenacious he originally was throughout the show with the things that he had with his father and everything like that. And I think of Huey Freeman from the Boondocks and how he's so sometimes like jaded, and he has this like Cassandra complex of like, oh, nobody listens to me when I speak my prophetic things. But at the end of the day, even though he almost like never smiles, at the end of the day, if you really watch him, all he really wants to do is just help everybody around him. And he does thankless work for everyone. Think of Susan Storm, who endlessly, you guys have absolutely no idea like how much Susan does on a day-to-day basis. And I know that she probably feels uncomfortable with me raving about this, but it's like, you seriously have not even like a fraction of it. And she has such an incredible heart that it's like it makes me want to like be protective of the oh so strong and oh so bad INTJs at times, like, because it's not that their tenacity or assertiveness is fake, but it's just that we don't see how much, a lot of times, like how much passion and how much heart is behind that TE. And once you are able to get past that TE wall that's trying to protect the core over there, then you really see like just how, for lack of better terms, fragile they could be, for lack of better terms, how sensitive they can be. And that's why they have to protect themselves like so much. And when you see that kind of like beauty, that kind of duality, that they are both strong, but they are also kind of sensitive and fragile at the same time, then you can't help but not appreciate it. And also, just all of the insight that they like provide. Like they have deep, rich metaphors and allegories and to say about everything. They want to help you with everything. We give a lot of helpful things like FE, but TE helps in so many different ways as well. And yeah, I could rave about them forever, but INTJs are just so much more than the villains that we see on TV. And I think that, yeah, I love them for that reason.
Wow, Denzel, that was really, I don't even know what to say. I'll get to geek out about you next week when we talk about the extroverted personality types. But I 100% agree with you about, on the outside, INTJs can look very stoic and very like direct and like focused on the job, or maybe even detached. But I've never known an INTJ who didn't have a fairly sensitive inner core. But that's one of the reasons, like you said, they're careful about who they let in because they don't want to show that to just anyone. And Denzel's a great person for INTJs because he's someone that is a great, insightful, wonderful person to be able to share that with. All right, so now we are moving to INTPs. So one of the things I really love about INTPs is how patient they are with just understanding how things work. And this is one of the ways I can contrast myself with INTPs. I am driven. So NTJs are very strategic. They're like, I'm trying to get to this end point, and then they're moving things around to try to get there. INTPs are more interested in the journey itself and learning how everything works along the way. So I can be very impatient in comparison to an INTP when I'm trying to do something and maybe there's a problem or something that needs to be troubleshooted. And I'm like, I just wanted to get to this. I have this benchmark I'm supposed to reach by the 4 p.m. today, or this other thing. Whereas INTPs are so patient. They're so intelligent. I know we shouldn't say certain types are smarter than others, but I've never known an unintelligent INTP. I'm sure they're out there, but the ones I've personally met have all been extremely intelligent. And part of that intelligence is that they are patient to understand what's going on behind the scenes in understanding how anything works. So they are the ones you're like, oh my gosh, my computer is having a problem. I'm sure they hate this sometimes because they're probably like family tech support for everyone in their families. I think it's just kind of the role of ITPs. But something that would absolutely infuriate me because I have a deadline I'm trying to meet, an INTP will come along and they will just get into the details and they will just get into understanding how the system works. And they aren't losing their head. They're very very like systematic at understanding how everything works in the system and then fixing it. And they do it all patiently. And I have so much admiration for that. But not only are they really intelligent, patient, and good at figuring out how these complicated things work, they're also really funny. I love INTP humor. I can get really snarky with them and sarcastic, and they can do it right back to me. Like when I'm with INTPs, you would think we hated each other because of the way we can joke around with each other, but it's actually like we love each other. But it's just that kind of snarky NT humor that's just like my brother-in-law is an INTP, and he's always like, I hate you, Susan. I hate you. But like that's just the way we joke around. And they're great storytellers actually too. Like when they're in their comfort zone and they're not feeling socially anxious or nervous or anything like that, they can just totally be themselves. They are amazing storytellers. I know a couple INTP dads, and they just make up these bizarre stories for their kids that you would never expect. they're so random and so hilarious, and they can just pull this whole world out of their head just in a moment and bring it to people. And I know we often talk about storytelling in relationship to like INFPs, who are also amazing storytellers, but I've also been surprised by how incredible at storytelling INTPs can be. So those are just some of the things I really love about INTPs. I'm excited to hear what you think, Denzel.
Yeah, INTPs. The first thing that comes up in my mind is just adorable and cute, which you might not associate with INTP, but again, like I said, subjective. It's me. I don't say it in a condescending way, but more so in a way that, like, I guess kind of similar to what I was saying about the INTJ. I feel like a lot of people aren't able to really see just how much a lot of times INTPs really just want to be accepted and to fit in. And that inferior FE really plays like a big part in it. Like, a lot of times they either really embrace that inferior FE so much, like, hey, I just want to be part of the squad, guys. Like, just let me be part of the squad. Or because they have gotten that inferior FE slapped out so much and they've had so many failed attempts at joining the squad, like you said, they have some of the most clever wit and humor. And sometimes it's literally that same humor that gets them into trouble, especially being TI dominant. So they might not know, like, oh, this lands properly, this doesn't land properly. Because instead of getting laughs, then people are like, how could you say such a sick and twisted, dark thing? And so then they're like, oh, and they get enough of those, and eventually they're ostracized. And then that's when you get the INTPs who are jaded and like, I don't care about people. I just want to tinker with my chemicals or just, work on IT stuff, or like, just be antisocial. But even through that, there's a origin story of the INTP just not having been accepted, and not being seen for like who they are. They do still want their alone time. So that's not to say that every INTP that wants alone time is just jaded in some way, of course. But usually when they're like irrationally antisocial, it's because they've been rejected from communities and groups so frequently. And I think that it's so important to understand INTPs so that, yeah, if they do say something, 95% of the time, I would say, they are not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. They just see things as like, very like, oh, this is just what it is. I always have to use like real examples in my life because FESE, but I know an INTP who just an example, like, there was a meme that my younger sister had like posted on Facebook one time, and it was like, which shape are you, and it was like 1 through 10, and it showed like different like body figures of women or something. And my sister was joking, and she said, oh, I think I'm definitely like a 6, which is something like a little bit like overweight or whatever. And the INTP commented, and they were all kind of like a little bit overweight, but the INTP comments are like, oh no, I think that you're a little bit more of like a 4. But like, and in his mind, like, me and my sister both knew that he was actually trying to be kinder, like say like, no, this is more accurate, like, you're not this. But from anyone else that's watching, it's like, oh my gosh, he's so rude, because the joke kind of went over his head. And he's a little bit younger too. But when I like talk to him, then it's just so clear like how much he just wants to speak the truth, or what his truth is, while also at the same time fitting in. So like, they don't intentionally try to like offend people. They just want to like, yeah, this is what I just genuinely think about XYZ. And they just kind of want to like nerd out, and they want to be accepted for how they are, and be able to talk about anything. These are the types of people who, when you bring up stuff like the multiverse theory or whatever, like, they can fine tune it for you. Like, well, actually, that wouldn't kind of work, because then this would contradict that, and boom, boom, boom. And they just have like a quick BS detector. So I really love talking to INTPs for that reason, especially being TI inferior myself. They have so much that they can like teach you, and they love to teach a lot of times too. The ones that are not really impatient with teaching, that is. So the ones that like really do like to like break things down, and like actually can see like you're interested in the topic that they have, they can break things down like for hours and really like give you like everything, because they have so much information. It's like, oh yeah, finally somebody wants to know about this, and then they just let it all loose. And I love that. I absolutely love that about them.
Thank you, Denzel. Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and especially what you mentioned about them being a lot more kind and wanting to be part of the group. A lot of people think of INTPs as just wanting to like leave me alone. I'm over here working on my video games, or something like that, And I have noticed that a lot of INTPs are really thoughtful people, and they really want some good relationships and close relationships, and they can be very caring and thoughtful in those relationships. Excuse me. But a lot of times they've been burned socially, especially as children, because they're so truth speaking. They say their mind, and they don't necessarily always know what some kind of social expectation is of how they're supposed to speak or what they're not supposed to talk about, what's politically correct versus not. As a lot of times they are definitely like socially burned at a young age. And so whenever an INTP does open up to me, I definitely feel that that's something to be treasured, because oftentimes they're shut down, not because what they have to say isn't valuable, because it often is, but just because they don't always frame it in a way that people are like used to hearing. And for me, as a fellow NT type, I love being able to talk about anything with them, and to disagree and have debates and not have it be personal. That's something that I really like. There's no one's walking off in a huff getting offended because you said the wrong thing. You can be 100% real with INTPs about a lot of things, and really sharpen your understanding of various subjects. So that's something I also completely love about them. We're going to completely switch gears now and go to ISFJs. So whenever I think of ISFJs that I love, I think of Jamie Cannon. I don't know how many of you know Jamie Cannon. She's done some writing for my blog. And she's a wonderful ISFJ. But ISFJ, what I love about ISFJs in general is that they're very gentle people. They have a very calming presence, and they're also very thoughtful and considerate, and they notice things about you. We always talk about how INFJs can see into you, but ISFJs notice things that a whole different set of things than an INFJ would notice, but it's still very attentive in that same way, attentive to what you like, to what makes you comfortable. They're attentive to the details and the stories that you share. They're interested in your perspective and your experiences that you've had, and they'll notice things like if you're the kind of person who's like, oh, I just really love I don't know, chicken salad sandwich with pecans in it or something random like that. They'd be like, you go to see them and they're got a chicken salad sandwich with pecans in it there because they remembered something you said in an offhand comment. They took it and remembered it. And I also find that they are really, really funny once you get them really comfortable. If you've ever read Janie's articles on my blog, they're hilarious. She has a way of connecting all these random things into these really hilarious stories. And I think people don't talk about the humor of, I feel like I've said a lot of the types are funny, but I don't feel like the humor of ISJ types gets enough attention. It's very quirky and offbeat, and they bring some of their inferior extroverted intuition into play with their humor. And I think it's amazing. There's some very, very funny people, but they're just easy to be around. They're just very gentle, thoughtful, considerate, attentive people, and there's this practicality to them that's also really nice. They're great helpers. Often I feel like when there's big social events, I'll find an ISFJ in the background doing all this helpful stuff that they never get the praise that they should for all these helpful things that they're doing, because they tend to work a lot behind the scenes. But as a fellow introvert, I often can find them somewhere in the background and have a good conversation with them. And I feel like they should get more praise than they do in most situations. All right, what about you, Denzel?
ISFJs do thankless work. They're the ones who, ISJs in general, they're the ones who kind of keep everything together. But, we'll talk about ISTJ later. But for ISFJs, it's oftentimes if we were to like stop them, you know, and I know this sounds like so stereotype, but a lot of times I've just seen this pattern. Like if we were to like kind of send all the ISFJs off on some type of vacation they very much probably need, and you know, try to handle things on our own, we'd eventually like realize like, dang, like I did not know like how frequently dishes were being like washed, or you know how frequent like small things that we don't even notice, like toilet paper being changed in the bathroom, and all of these things. You know, it's like, man, how many times do we eat? Like, how long does it take to cook? And wow, and not even just that, but like the recipes that we have to like follow to get it to right to this amount, etc. I feel like ISFJs they do this, and most of them they do it like so thanklessly when they want to help you out. Like they will be the ones to like they might not always know what to say, but they know how to like aid to you in a very practical manner, which is very different, you know, a lot of times from like how NFJs are. Of course there's like overlap here and there, but a lot of times like, you know, with ISFJs, you know, like the INFJs, like they're the ones that like might really like speak into your soul, you know, and then the ISFJs, like they're the ones just like, oh man, like you're having a hard time or whatever, I don't really know how to counsel you, but what's your favorite food? Or not even ask you what the favorite food is, but they just might have already like remembered what it is and randomly surprise you with it. And it's like, yeah, you know, I figured that because you're really depressed, you probably don't really have the energy to cook. So I kind of meal prepped for you for the rest of the week. True story. And it's just like these kinds of things that you don't even really think about, how like they really are the ones like really like mother a lot of people, and they keep a lot of things together. And I think that ISFJs, they also definitely do have like a very quirky side. I think of Pam from The Office, and you know she was like, you know, messing like with Jim all the time and everything. And even though like Pam, like on the outside, seems like very like normal, regular, average, and whatnot, and who knows, maybe people would say like she is. You could still see that she had an artistic side to her. Like she literally had like an inner artist to her, and she at the same time also had like a really sharp wit that she had to her and everything. And there was a part of her that always wanted to like get out of just the norm and the routine and have some fun, which is why her and Jim got along like so well in that way. So yeah, I feel like ISFJs, that's something that they definitely should continue to be like thankful, like we should they should be thanked for, because they really do bring a lot to the world that keeps the world sustained. You know, the ISFJs are usually the ones who are like retaining the memories from the recipes from like ever since like the past 5 generations and everything like that, to make that perfect pie that everybody's like, you know, always trying to like rave, that always like raving about, and things of that nature. So yeah, I feel like they really bring like a lot of that Demeter energy, that mothering type of energy that nurtures in ways that we don't even always notice until it's gone.
Thank you, Denzel. I appreciate you sharing that. I think that one of the things that I've known, I just came to mind while you were talking about that taking care of people. And I've known several ISFJs who are in the medical field. And one of the things that they all have in common is that they deal with people who are in sometimes messy situations. Like, you know, embarrassing things happen. You know, like one of them works with people who are having gut issues and stuff like that. And all of them are very pragmatic about all of that and very like, whatever, don't be embarrassed. I see this stuff all the time. You don't need to worry about it. Like there's this pragmatism to ISFJs that I also really appreciate, because a lot of other people would be like, oh no, or maybe get squeamish about things. But ISFJs, it's that censor, especially that censor, judger, down to earth side of them, this very practical side of them. Like, hey, nothing, you're not going to scare me, nothing, you know, just relax, I've got this. You know, don't be scared if like you're sick and you throw up, or don't be scared if your stomach's having problems or whatever. And I mean, I think that, and they're really intelligent too in these fields. Like they remember these details about all these different patients, and they remember all the details about the medications that they need, and they're so good at that. And I also know several ISFJ teachers where it's the same thing. They like know everything about their students. and very down to earth. Like they can run a tight ship while also being very empathetic. And so yeah, there's so many things I could say about ISFJs, but they really value friendliness, and they really get joy out of putting people at ease and helping them to feel comfortable. And they also have like a really high attention to detail with the tasks that they do. Like I know several ISFJs who do like cake decorating and baking and stuff like that, and it's like it's the most beautiful cake decorating you've ever seen. Like I love baking, and people love the stuff that I bake, but I don't make it pretty like an ISFJ does. They'll go the extra mile and make it look good too. And I found that a lot of ISFJs are really good at crafting and things like that. To have like hands-on hobbies that they just love as well, that they're really, really talented at. All right, so next let's talk about ISFPs. And it's just one letter different, but in many ways a wildly different personality type than ISFJs. So ISFPs, what I love about them, there's so many things, I don't even know where to begin sometimes, but one of the things I really love is that they will not tolerate you being fake with them. Not that I'm particularly fake with anyone, but they encourage you to be real, and they will make space for you to be real in a way that I really, really like. And they just will not stand for people just throwing out, I don't know, being wasting time with too much propriety. That and that's for me, as it's partially because I'm an INTJ. I'm like, yes, this is amazing. I love this. Like, let's push past all the, fake how do you do stuff and just get right to like what we actually feel about things. And they're very funny in a very different way from how ISJs are funny. Like ISJs have this kind of, because they're bringing extroverted intuition into it. It's this kind of quirky, they're finding random connections, but also it's very, I'm having a like similar to like Hugh Grant's humor. Anyways, if you don't know who that is, you might know what I'm talking about. But ISFPs are really funny in this very like, I don't know. I'm going to leave that to Denzel to describe, but I've never known an ISFP who wasn't funny. And, but I also find them to be exceptional listeners. They are really good at actually listening to what you have to say and not tuning out of it. And they're really good at, caring about like your real genuine thoughts and being open-minded when you have different values than they do, which is something that a lot of times we talk about. Like unhealthy IFPs can kind of demonize people who have different values, but I found that every healthy to average ISFP I've known is actually very curious about people who think differently than they do. But they're also not afraid to stand their ground and have an unpopular opinion when everyone else is believing something different. Like they're ISFPs have a lot of bravery, I think, with being pariahs because they don't fit in. And I think that's something that I really respect and admire, because a lot of people feel like they've got to wear all these masks and they've got to try to fit in. And ISFPs, I think everyone, is a human survival instinct, wants to fit in to some degree. But I found that ISFPs don't mind being the source of gossip or the source of or being different, marching to the beat of their own drum, because they have to be themselves and to have their integrity. And that's something that I really, really admire about ISFPs. I also admire that, I know we can't say enough about creativity with ISFPs. They're hugely creative. They're very aware of the aesthetic of things, I've noticed, in a way that other types aren't. And one thing I appreciate about them, this goes along with them being good listeners, they tend to be very quiet people. But when they say something, it's really interesting. Like they don't waste your time with a lot of rambling. And I know this is, again, an INTJ perspective. I get frustrated sometimes being with people who just go on and on and on, or people who don't get to the point, or who just kind of stay in minutia for a long time. I know I shouldn't, but I do. ISFPs, I very rarely deal with minutia with them. I feel like they're fairly quiet, but when they do speak, they have something interesting to say. And they're all wildly different. I mean, while they have the same sense of conviction and the same sense of authenticity across the board generally, I find that they all have very different tastes and values. And so like you can't say like, and this goes really for all personality types, but I've known like an ISFP who's very like pro police, for example, and another one who's like anti the police. And like they're both just as passionate about how they feel about the police, but like they're still going to let each other have their say, and give people space to share their viewpoints and try, and they don't just shut it down usually. What about you, Denzel?
I think that last point that you made is the one that like I really deeply appreciate about ISFPs. So I'm married to one, so again, more subjectivity. But I think that ISFPs are so often super good at being able to understand that I have my own values and you have your own values, and you know what? That's okay. Um, like they're able to really shift perspectives a lot of times and be able to see like they really do have a live and let live. They don't they take their values seriously, but it's mainly like for themselves, and then it's almost like I don't really care what your values are like that much. I will just stand like as long as they don't impede on mine. So they don't really often make it so much as a crusade to try to get everybody else to like have the same values that they do. And I think that there's something that I really appreciate about that, because it really allows them to like see almost even more nuances in why others may or may not have shared values that they do. I also love their quiet nature. And I think for whatever reason, generally speaking, they tend to just have an affinity for aesthetic appeal. Like when you think of like like a lot of these ISFPs, like I think of certain energies that they might have that both have like a physically attractive quality as well as like a gentle, warm, almost like seaside kind of mermaid spirit. Like I think of like INFPs. If INFPs are the fairies of the type world, then ISFPs are like the majestic mermaids. You know, very sensual and very quiet. Like they flow with the water. Stuff of that nature. They see the insight. They see the depths. Especially with the FI-NI combination that they have going on, and they're able to make it very succinct because of the SE auxiliary they often have. So just like you said, like even though they have a sensing function up higher, the amount of depth that they are really capable of going into is really like slept on a lot of times, to the point where I think that ISFPs more than almost any other type are mistaken for INFJs a lot of times, because people don't expect that kind of depth to come from these types. From ISFPs a lot of times, I think a lot of people mainly think of them as like Patrick Star or something, but really like we're actually looking at people like Michael Jackson, or even like movies like I like Mulan, the fictional character Mulan. Like she's another example of like an ISFP. We look at a whole bunch of like other artists, like the artist Her. If we listen to Her's poetry and music that she has, and their ability to be able to really get into human emotion and evoke it in a way that's like whenever they perform, whenever they sing, whenever they paint, whatever types of ways that they express their minds through art, because their articulation is not usually their strongest suit. In fact, the reason why I actually believe that they're amongst the most quiet type, if not the most quiet type, I think it's between ISTP and ISFP. That's not to say that you'll never run into a talkative ISTP or ISFP, but I think that if we were to get every type together, then the ISTP and ISFP are probably going to say the least words. And usually it's because all of the insight that they usually have and all of the things that they're processing, especially for ISFPs, it's more about finding a way to express it rather than articulating it, which is pretty different. And when you compare it to like an INFP, for example, who they tend to be a lot more verbose due to extroverted intuition, with the ISFP, I've literally talked to a few, especially my wife, who as they're trying to explain certain things, then it's like my wife will literally say in mid conversation, I'm sorry, I don't feel like talking anymore, because it's just like it's so difficult for her to it's like she knows what she wants to say, but it's hard to articulate it. But if she were to express it through song or through a painting or some sort of like poetry of some sort, then now all of a sudden it becomes more alive because now you're able to feel the concept, you're able to witness it. And I think that ISFPs do very well with being about it rather than just talking about it. Like they embody the values that they have throughout life. So that way they don't have to tell you, oh, yeah, I think that this is right and I think this is wrong. They just embody their values. Like I think of Tori Kelly, and I think that she's somebody who does that very well. The artist, Tori Kelly, very great songwriter. And she really embodies her values a lot without being preachy about it or anything like that. And they just kind of like live their own lives, and they're just very like lax and chill, and have a lot of like that kind of like Hestia energy. But don't get on their bad side too, because Daenerys Targaryen is also an example of an ISFP, as well as Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So they're not all super soft, and you don't even want to get on the bad side of Mulan. So yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you. They don't thinking of, ISFJs, like ISFJs will often appear more like warm and soft, I guess. I mean, that sounds bad because they can be really tough people, but ISFPs often look a little bit more reserved and stoic. But I think that what you were saying about the difference between ISFPs and INFPs is interesting, because for INFPs, their first extroverted function is extroverted intuition, which is about exploring ideas and concepts and possibilities and connections. And a lot of times when INFPs get into extroverted intuition, they do get more talkative as they like generate ideas and possibilities. But for ISFPs, their first extroverted function is sensing, and that's more about experiencing the world and having a hands-on immersion with the world. So ISFPs are generally, to me, look like one of the most, like you said, one of the most introverted looking personality types, because even when they go to an extroverted space, it's often in a creative or physical aspect.
Yeah, I actually meant to say too, like I knew another ISFP back in college. I always tell the story. He very rarely spoke, but whenever we would go to like school parties and stuff like that, he was the center of attention a lot of times. And it wasn't because of him talking or even like engaging with people, but it's because the way he took over the dance floor, and he was so good at dancing, and everyone's like, oh, and they're like hyping him, but he wasn't talking to anyone, and he wasn't like going around and being a social butterfly. And right when we were like, right whenever the party would be over, he's right back to being quiet and not really saying that much. So that's really like a big tell. I even remember from David Kiersey's book,
Please understand me.
Please Understand Me. I was like, please see me. Doesn't sound like that. But on the back of the book, there's something that like I think he had like certain like things for every type, and for the ISFP he wrote sees much, says little, and I was like, wow, that's totally it. Like I see ISFPs as like cats of the world. Like the cats, they see everything, but you very rarely like hear them. Then they just kind of mind their own business. They kind of take care of themselves. They'll cuddle with you when they want to, and then when they don't want to, they don't want to. And they're just doing their own thing. They are soft and cuddly, but they also have nails, or they have claws. So be careful of that if you try to take advantage of them in that way.
Yeah, I 100% think that the cats of the MBTI community make sense, because they do tend to look more like held back and mysterious. And someone who I think could be ISFP, I'm kind of going back and forth between ISFP and INTJ for this person, is the actor Cillian Murphy. A lot of people, someone typed him as ENTJ. I don't agree with that, but there's all these memes about him that go around where he's just looking totally bored in interviews, and like he doesn't want to be there at all, but then when he does speak, he's actually really nice. He just looks like totally uninvested in what's going on around him. And I've noticed that ISFPs have that style. Sometimes you'll be with them and they'll just look totally bored, like they don't want to be there at all, and you're thinking, oh gosh, they don't like me at all, but then they like you just fine. They're just like, their face, because they don't have extroverted feeling in their top functions, like their face isn't really showing what they feel. What they feel is going on under the surface, but it's not evident so much on their facial expression.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people feel maybe even a little intimidated by ISFPs, or they're like, whoa, this type's really mysterious, and they're kind of curious about them. but they're a lot more kind than maybe like they're not as they're very kind people. They're very thoughtful people, but a lot of times just on the outside, you wouldn't necessarily know it. And then
Yeah.
you're talking about your friend who dances. That reminds me of my ISFP daughter who, you know, seems really quiet and everything. But apparently when she went to this dance, maybe she'd hate me for saying this, but she was like going crazy and having a great time, like dancing. And I was like, really? You were dancing the whole time? She's like, yeah. And she was like dancing with a mop. Like it didn't matter. And you know, and then like when she was in school, it was like she didn't say a lot, but people come around and watch her draw because she was really good at art. And that's how she would often express her feelings, was through art and things like that. And I found with many ISFPs, it's like they need some physical way to express themselves rather than verbal. So art, music, dancing, I don't know, hiking, whatever. Like there's usually some kind of creative avenue that they use as the medium through which they express themselves. And so it's always really fascinating to see how they do it, what they come up with. And there's often a lot of symbolism in their art as well, because they also have introverted intuition in their function stack. And that kind of shows up as often this tendency to have symbolic things in their art.
Yeah. Yeah. Their insight, like I said, is very slept on. And I can't emphasize that enough. I'm surprised every time, not just with my wife, but with other ISFPs. And I'm just like, wow, like there's so much that people just don't know that's in you because they don't maybe have that, like, you know, interest, or they're probably afraid because of the stoic looking face. I had to look up Cillian Murphy because I didn't know him by name, but as soon as I saw his face, I'm like, oh, that guy. Yeah, I can definitely see ISFP or INTJ for him. But yeah, like that resting face of like just interest is very common for y'all's type, like ISFP and INTJ. So either one.
Yeah, I mean, me and Denzel could probably go on a lot about them because I think that's also probably one of our absolute favorite types. Now let's move on to ISTJ. And I have a special soft spot for ISTJs because I think they are like one of the most people intuitives when they write about ISTJs, write the most boring descriptions. I'm sorry. Like I know I'm an intuitive too, but it's kind of been a crusade of mine to be like, I'm not gonna write boring descriptions of ISTJs. I don't know if I'm succeeding or not, but because the ISTJs I've known in my life have not been remotely boring. I feel like there's this very gentle, quiet, wise demeanor about them. And they also are very caring. It's very different from the way an extroverted feeling type would show they care. And granted, I'm an INTJ, so I think the way they show they care is more evident to me because I'm also an ITJ, so I see it really obviously. I'm like, whoa, they are really caring. But if you are maybe a feeling judger, it might not be as obvious. I've noticed that ISTJs will take care of so many details for you that you, again, like just like with ISFJs, that you don't even recognize they're doing it sometimes. They notice things about you, things that you like. For example, my grandfather, my favorite, I shouldn't say my favorite grandfather, I don't even care who. He's an ISTJ. And then my father-in-law is also an ISTJ. And like they would give these gifts like unexpectedly that were like exactly what I needed at that moment. And I'd be like, what? How did they know? And they were paying attention. And also good listeners. Like you could talk about things. Now sometimes they'd give their opinion very forthrightly and they would be completely in disagreement with your opinion. And at times it could feel a little bit condescending or whatever, because it would be like, oh, well, back in my day, this, you know, and that the argument would be like what you're arguing with didn't necessarily match their experience and what they believe via their worldview. But at the same time, they were still willing to listen to you. And they're also quiet in a similar way they're not like ISFPs, but they were quiet and good listeners, and they weren't just trying to interject and jump in all the time. And that's something that I really appreciate about them. And they don't complain a lot. That's something I appreciate about ISTJs. Like they tend to be really hard workers. Been around so many people who just are constantly have something negative to say about everyone. And I found that with ISTJs, the ones least I've known, they don't do that. Like there'll be someone literally talking bad about them and they won't say anything about that person back to them, like just to anyone else. Like they won't gossip about people. And when they say what they mean and they mean what they say, and that's something I really appreciate. Like they show that what they care about through their actions. And they're not going to be those people who are like, oh, I'm your best friend, and then they talk bad about you behind your back. They're the kind of people who, if they tell you they care about you, they genuinely care about you, and they'll be with you like through thick and thin. And so I'll look at my notes here because I don't want to miss anything. Like my brain kind of goes foggy when I'm actually doing live streams. Good. I wrote good at planning and good with money. Like as a fellow TJ, it's actually something I really admire. I appreciate people who are good at planning things and they've got contingency plans and they've got backup plans. When I'm doing something and there's an ISTJ on board, I'm like, oh, good. Like this is not going to be absolute chaos. Like this is going to be efficient. This is going to be organized. There's going to be the details are going to be taken care of. And I think that's something that they do for people. People don't realize how much they're doing to make other people's lives more stable, less chaotic, and more smooth, because we just kind of take it for granted sometimes. But they do a lot to make people's lives just easier. And then I wrote good with money because I just think they've got so much in. If you are ever trying to get your finances in check and like actually make sense of your investments and things like that, ISTJs are amazing at that. Like they're so good at being like, oh, here's how you should like you should invest in this company, or maybe you should use this budgeting system so that you can get everything in order. And I found that many ISTJs I've known who do this, it's like they really care about you and like getting you on the right foot. And they have really smart, practical advice. And I really appreciate that so much. So that's just one. Those are just some of the many things that I really love about ISTJs. I'm gonna let you talk now, Denzel.
Yeah, I'm grateful because I actually had to grow a lot in my appreciation for ISTJs from when I first came into type. That was the type that I had the most conflict with, even before I knew about type. Like I learned about type, and then I was like, what type is this person? Oh, ISTJ. What about ISTJ? And they happen to also be my opposite type. You know, from what I know, opposite is the first three letters, the first three dichotomies change, and the last one you keep. So, you know, yeah, there's that. But I really appreciate them so much more now, and I think it's because I started from that low of like butting heads with them, and now like I went from that position of like, oh, if I'm meeting an ISTJ, we're probably gonna like butt heads, to like now like really having an understanding of them to the point where like now when we do talk, then there's just such it's almost like how I was talking about the INFP, like where there's just like a very like deep, like even if we're coming from different places, we can really appreciate where like the place of where we're coming from. So ISTJs, believe it or not, have an elite sense of humor, and they don't even try. I think that's like just something like that. Like when you watch them on television, even like they tend to come off as like the grumpy types. Like I think of Stanley from The Office, or even Angela from The Office, and it's like they're hilarious without even like trying. And yeah, they can be like very like anal in certain ways, but then also they tend to be like very lax because it's almost like a contradiction. They're both very hardworking and very lazy at the same time. And I think that is absolutely hilarious because it's like they're working very hard so they don't have to work at all because they don't want to work. They're like, you know, and every time you applaud an ISTJ for all of the hard work that they do and everything, a lot of times I found that they themselves say like, man, I don't even work that hard. I'm lazy. Like that was easy. I just kind of like did this so that I can get to doing this. And I can just get back to eating my snacks and, you know, etc. But they'll get the job done. Like they're incredibly reliable. They're incredibly dutiful and all of that. If you want like the almost perfect way to get something done that's like surefire, ISTJs are usually the way to go because that SI like knows like this is how it's always been done. That's very consistent and reliable. And then TE comes in like this is the most effective way to actually carry out that task. And so, a lot of people might be like, oh, we know that's outdated. Well, you always have the freedom to explore different ways, but at the end of the day, like if you're actually looking for something that's just going to surefire work, like I think that, like they are the best types to be able to have that. I think that they're also kind of like, not even kind of, definitely like the INTJ, where they have that TE that's protecting that FI. So they can tend to be like very nostalgic, very sentimental. I know ISTJs that like you would not expect it, but they are very sensitive. They, when they do let somebody in, they latch. And it's almost like they can never let go of that person. Even though on the external they might seem like they did, there's something that's always in them that's like missing the person that they've let go of, or the people that they've let go of, not just like romantically, but even like platonically. And you would think like, man, like I did not know that you cared like this much, but it comes from such a deep place. But they often have like a hard time expressing that care in like, words or, affection. And so sometimes they might do it in like a monetary way, like, oh, well, how did you not know? Like actions speak louder than words, right? I sent you money every year. Like clearly I love you. And to a lot of people, they might not know, like, well, no, I kind of wanted to hear you say that you loved me. I wasn't really sure if you were just throwing me money or whatever. But sometimes that's literally like their way of like doing it. Like I think a lot of like acts of service is a really good way for ISTJs to like show a lot of like love. I think a lot of times too that we underestimate like how capable they are. Like I know this is going to shock a lot of people, but I very firmly believe that Beyonce is an ISTJ. And at first when I was like trying to like think like I went into like all of these documentaries and stuff like that, like I had very different types in mind of expecting for her to be. And then as I really went into them, I had like a whole like team of people that were all like, watching videos and discussing. It's like, whoa, this is an ISTJ. And like she like has revolutionized, and we don't usually attribute like revolutionary to the ISTJ, but she like revolutionized like a lot of the music industry in so many different ways. And the way that she's able to execute the concerts, everything that she touches, everything that she does, you see like how precise and accurate like each like thing that she does, and like the amount of like rehearsal that she goes into and the passion that she has. And she just tries to like embody all of the work, even though like maybe in interviews she might not have like that much to say. I feel like she allows a lot of it to like be in her art, and then you even see that inferior NE come out a lot too. With like now you see that she kind of like brings in almost like a Barnum kind of thing. Like Barnum, I believe that at least in The Greatest Showman, like he was an ENFP, and they're like attracted to like those who are like the outcasts and are not really like normal or of the norm. You can see a little bit of that ENFP in the ISTJ as well. Like when we look at Beyonce, like she's really attracted a lot of like the LGBTQ plus community into, and she like advocates for them in that way. And I feel like that's something that we can really see, especially with those who have like integrated the NE. Like ICJs, again, they have a lot that can be admired, and they don't even ask to be admired for it. They're just like, oh, I'm just doing my job. It's like, oh, thanks so much for this. Yeah, well, if I don't do it, who else will? Like, it's just everyday life for them.
Yeah, I haven't watched a lot of interviews with Beyonce, but I've never heard of ISTJ for her. So now I'm like, oh, maybe I need to go watch some things, because I trust you, like, and I'm really curious how that show up. One of my very favorite, if anyone watches anime, I mean, me and Denzel watch anime, so we make anime references, but one of my very favorite ISTJs in anime would be the Jujutsu sorcerer Namani in Jujutsu Kaisen. He's like an ISTJ, but he's also this like super fierce sorcerer. But then he has to do everything on a timeline. It's like, oh, it's 5:00. I need to be done now. And he's like one of my favorite anime characters of all time, but also I think very strongly an ISTJ. So yeah, if you want a good ISTJ character, go watch Jujutsu Kaisen for him. Now onto ISTPs. So my brother is an ISTP. I also have an ISTJ brother. Now I feel bad because I I didn't talk about my ISTJ brother, but all right. But I have my older brother's an ISTP. One of the things I love about ISTPs is, again, you can talk about anything with an ISTP. You can debate anything with an ISTP. You can have a great argument with them. They're super smart. It's like INTPs, they're really good at figuring out how things work and troubleshooting in a way that like TJ types can get impatient with that, because TJ types are logical, but they're very also goal oriented, whereas TP types, it's not that they're not goal oriented, they're also goal oriented, but like they're more willing, the goal is often to understand how the thing works than to just use the thing to reach a goal. And so ISTPs are amazing at troubleshooting complicated problems, and so they're great when you're in a crisis and you're like, I don't know what to do, this thing's broken. And again, I feel like ITPs, and whether they're ISTPs or INTPs, are often like their families' IT people. And I just want to thank all you ITPs for doing that for all these, for everybody. But they're also really smart. They know a little bit about everything, or a lot about everything. I feel like there's almost nothing you could touch on that they haven't thought about at some point or researched or studied in some way. They're also a lot of fun. So my brother, the ISTP, when we were younger, we used to go on all these, we used to walk to work together all the time. And we'd come up with these big plans about how we were going to backpack across the United States. We're going to travel to Thailand. And we had all these big ideas of like adventures we were going to take. And it was really fun, like very adventurous. We didn't end up doing a lot of the adventures we talked about, but they have this adventurous side that I think is amazing. This ability to live outside the boundaries of what everyone else thinks you should do. Like, it's like they don't have to have the 9-to-5 job, and like they don't have to follow all the rules that society dictates for them. They need freedom, but they really excel in that freedom, and they can be a lot of fun because they get you up and moving and to like explore the world. But you can also just sit and talk to them also for a long time, debating different things, learning about different things, learning from them. And you could be honest about whatever your thoughts are. And you don't have to be afraid. Like for me, I think as an INTJ, I've often encountered situations where, oh no, I accidentally said something that offended somebody and I didn't mean to, or, oh no, I accidentally said something that wasn't appropriate, or this or that or the other thing. And I think a lot of INTJs, especially INT females, kind of live through life walking on eggshells. And so whenever I find someone that I can just be like 100% real with, it's like, oh, this is so nice. What a relief. I can just be myself. And I think ISTPs are one of the types that I can do that with, and I really appreciate about them. I also think they are more sensitive than people realize. Again, you got to stick up for these IT types, because one thing that I think is interesting about ISTPs, they get secondhand embarrassment really bad. I don't know if you've seen this, Denzel, but every ISTP I've known, it's like, because they have inferior extroverted feeling, like if someone's being really like, if they're watching a movie where all these embarrassing things happen, they're just dying. They're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. Like they might enjoy it, but it's just, they do care about being able to fit in, just like INTPs and both any thinking, perceiving type, they still have extroverted feeling. They still want to feel like they fit in with a community somewhere, that they have a place, that they have their people and everything like that. And so they're more sensitive socially than many people expect. Some people think, oh, they're just blunt. They don't care. They're not really big communicators, not really talkative, but they still actually desire those relationships, those friendships. And they can be very helpful and practically helpful. Like you may think, oh, they don't really care that much about me. But then when something goes wrong, like you got in a car accident or something and you need someone, they'll show up. Like I find that they're very often like great in first responder positions, and often you'll see them in first responder jobs where they want to help out people in practical ways. They want to make a difference in the world in a hands-on, real world way. And they can be extremely helpful people. So those are some of my thoughts on ISTPs. I'm going to ask you your thoughts now, Denzel.
Yeah, ISTPs are also amongst my top 3 favorite types. I think that they are the coolest type, just subjectively, speaking. Like when I remember like growing up, again, before I knew about personality types and everything, like the types that I often found myself really like admiring and emulating were ISTPs and INTJs, and they can tend to look very similar. So I think that's also like another thing. Like, you know, they can get confused for each other a lot. Like a lot of types that kind of like how the ISFPs, a lot of people like online will type a lot of ISFPs as INFJ. A lot of people will type ISTPs as INTJ. And there's key differences there, but you know, at least when it comes to the external, like they can appear very similarly. But yeah, ISTPs, you know, they're the stereotypical secret agent type, you know, the stereotypical, like, you know, I can fix that kind of person, the one who does everything so cool and smoothly, and nobody, and they make it seem like so easy. You know, again, they don't say that much, they're just kind of like chilling, you know, whatever they, and what makes them even extra cool is how much they don't care about what other people might think of them. But at the same time, and it's not as much as the INTP, and I have a theory behind that as well. But well, the theory is just like, you know, simply put, is because they're sensors, so it's easier for them. Whereas like INTPs feel extra ostracized, not only having FE inferior, but then also being intuitive types at that. But for ISTPs, even if they aren't able to really like fit in necessarily, they at least know that just by being in the moment and like relaxing in certain ways, like they can somehow be like almost like praised in a way, like just like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just being myself, I'm just minding my own business, and everyone somehow likes me. Yeah, and you know, they'll be in like, you know, sports and things of that nature. They tend to really excel. Like I think vast majority of the Olympics is actually made up of ISTPs, because that TI and the SE, it like has like a very particular type of focus on how to do things. You know, in the NBA, a lot of ISTPs are in there. You know, Steph Curry, ISTP, Allen Iverson was an ISTP. You know, so when you really think of like how they can like show up, you know, there's also man, how am I forgetting her name? Right, Tiana Taylor. I believe that she's an ISTP as well. She's an artist, very good at singing, incredible dancer. If you look her up, goodness. And I believe that Usher is an ISTP, you know, the performer as well. Like, and just seeing like how they all move, like they all have like a certain type of like suave nature to them, and they're very honest people. But again, like the INTP, they're not often trying to actually be dicks. Like sometimes they just say things like just like how they are. Like I think I told the story in one of our previous live streams, so I'll just condense it, of how I profiled an ISTP, and he told me a story about how like somebody asked him like, have you noticed anything different about me at work? And he was like, no. And then she's like, so you didn't notice I lost weight? And he's like, no, I didn't. And then she called him an a-hole, and he's like, and he was so confused, like, what? Like, and he literally goes on to explain, like, I could have lied to her and said, oh, yeah, but like, no, I was being honest. Like, I just didn't know. And he said he wasn't trying to be mean. He didn't tell her this part, but he told me, he was like, you know, if you're like 180 pounds and you lose 30 pounds, yeah, sure, I'll notice. But if you're like 300 pounds and you lose 30 pounds, how am I supposed to notice that? And he was like, it sounds like a mean thing to say, but like that's ISTPs is like SE, like it just sees things for what it is, and then TI is like, this is just what makes sense to me, regardless of whether it's a social nicety or not. And eventually just gets to a point, it's like, man, I'm just not going to say anything, because every time I open my mouth, somehow somebody's getting hurt, and I'm not even trying to hurt their feelings. But so I have a soft spot for them as well, because I see how much like I don't think they need like as much coddling or whatever I was talking about with the INTPs, because you know they tend to like, again, I guess being sectors, like they fit in a little bit easier than maybe like the intuitive types would be, but there still is like an something about them that's like they do want to fit in, they do want to like be accepted, and they just want to be able to speak their minds freely. And I like being able to provide them that space to just say the absolute most like darkest thoughts and things of that nature, and not really like be worried that even me as an FE Dom, that's terrible. It's like, no, because a lot of times, especially them being my reverse type, it's like, you know, a lot of these are the thoughts that an ENFJ suppresses. So I'm glad that somebody says it. And, you know, although a lot of times I'm the one who's like watching you get crucified on it, crucified for it on Twitter, if somebody comes to me, then I will advocate for you. And so, yeah, I think that ISTPs, especially, I really respect their desire for accuracy, like for seeing things like for what it is, and then also really like questioning things and probing things and trying to make sure that things are like really what they are, being as fair as possible. That like it's incredibly rational, like how they operate. Like even if it's something that might be against them, they really just search and try to give the truth. And that's something else that I really admire about them.
I love everything you had to say about ISTPs and agree with it 100%. And I think that people give them way too much of a hard time. I kind of feel like, I don't know. I have like a certain types that I just feel like they don't deserve the flack they're given, either in real life or in the type community. I have a funny story that I'm not going to go into like very deep right now because that'd be crazy. But I actually, when I was younger, I had like a online. No, I was friends with an ISTP for a really long time when we were like teenagers, and then he was in the military, and we like were pen pals through email for like years. And then he came back to the United States, and we like kind of dated, but then like he went back to his job, which was like bomb ordnance disposal. Anyways, and turns out like I thought, okay, I don't think he's really into me, and he didn't really communicate with me. Well, a couple of years later he's like, no, I was like crazy, and we both realized we both were like really cared about each other a lot and really wanted a relationship, but both of us had completely missed the cues on it entirely, like because we're both IT types and we're not good at like communicating our feelings. So we were just like, we completely missed the ship on like what the other person was feeling. And I thought about it recently, like that is such a stereotypical INTJ, ISTP trying to have a relationship thing. Like I had no clue he was into me like love, like no idea, and then, he died young and it was like, but anyways, it was just like, ISTPs, like they're really they speak very directly, they're very blunt, and I appreciated that about them. And but they feel more deeply than I think if most people realize. Even, like me, I'd been friends with this guy for years and years and years and years, but I didn't know how he felt. And so it's just like it's just interesting. But thank you. Like, listen, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who showed up today to listen to us, go on and on about our favorite personality types. I mean, and just what we love about you guys. Everyone who we've talked about today. I mean, I've learned so much from every single one of these types. I have so many fond memories and great stories and wonderful experiences with you. And if you took time out of your schedule to be here today, I really appreciate it. Listen, we are going to be back next week to talk about the extroverts as well, because they also need recognition, and especially, our beloved Denzel, who's here. We need to explain like what is so wonderful about these extroverted types as well. So join us next week. If you didn't hear your type talked about today, if you're an extroverted type, join us next week so we can talk about your type as well. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them. I know we didn't get to a lot of questions because we weren't really explaining like a new concept. We were just sharing what we love about the types, but maybe in the comments you can write what you love about certain personality types. We'd love to hear what you think. Or if you have a question about certain personality types, go ahead and leave that in the comments as well. If you are not sure what your personality type is, Denzel is the person for you. He is a personality profiler, and I'm going to ask you, Denzel, if you can tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, so if you would like to either confirm what your type is, if you have no idea what your type is, if you feel like you already know what your type is, but now you want to like really know like, like what makes you what you are, then you can check me out at denzelmensa.com, and you can book a profiling session with me. And if you already know what your type is and you just want to become a better version of yourself, then I'm also happy to give coaching to you. So you can also book coaching sessions over there with me at denzelmensa.com. If you just want to chop it up, talk about any of the topics that we've already talked about here, or talked about like on my own YouTube channel, then again, yeah, denzelmensa.com. And yeah, just be sure to if the time slots don't work for you, then be sure to email me privately so that like I can actually create like a time slot like outside of those normal work hours. That way, like, we can still get you in. But yeah, thanks for having me, Susan.
Thank you, Denzel. And yeah, absolutely take him up on that, because he is the person I send everyone to if I'm not, if I don't have time to profile them, or if I'm too close to them to really be able to see it very clearly, I'll send them to Denzel. So definitely reach out to him, and join us next week in 2024 for the extroverted personality types. And thank you so much, everybody. And we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.